Remember today, Godzilla, we're just reading through. All right, cultural resistance. Perfection in our work is a very important, but perfection even in our matter of dressing. I tell the comrades over and over to fix their collars and to tuck in their shirt tails. The people that is fighting for its independence, for its dignity, from today on must proceed with clean feet. When one walks in the mud, patience, but when we get out of the mud, we're going to wash our feet, clean clothes are only one way, undress tie of cloth, wash up and you will become clean. Comb your hair, and if there isn't a comb, make a comb from a stick if necessary, if you're not able to buy one. But there are comrades who seem to have pride in their uncombed hair. It seems like an unimportant thing, but it's very important for our dignity in order to open new paths of life. The way in which we behave has great importance. Before, the Tagas, these are the bad, like Portuguese, these are the colonialists, said that we were quite filthy. But when we dress well, they call us doctors, black with a doctor's. Ways that was the Tago's position. But we don't have that complex where we're against everything dirty. We're against filthiness. For example, I marvel at how some comrades are incapable of lying down in bed as on the ground. Fortunately, all aren't like this, but it doesn't matter if the bedroom is full of trash or clean. Even leaders amidst a mess, for example, are not capable of getting up to clean. They're incapable of giving their life and their land, and they're not capable of they're not capable of cleaning the ground. For they're not capable of sweeping, of straightening up the yard, of making any sort of small garden, when despite all of the work there is time for this. There are comrades of ours in the land who made their base beautiful, well put together, and even being against the bases. I never told them anything because I saw an effort, a will to arrange, but others don't want to know. When a man or a woman wants to give their life for a cause, they have to be clean, in a clean environment, to make all of those around them clean, because only in this way can their spirit be cleaner each day. We have to have a notion of time in our culture, in our actions. We weren't the ones who invented the watch, but we have not have a notion of time, comrades. We are in general, our comrades don't have this, contrary to our people who know very well what time is, who know that if they don't cultivate until the determinate time, then things turn for the worst. That one has to sow so many days after the first rain. If not, then this is bad. They know that so many days after the plant grows on the edge of the house or rice in the nursery, these have to be taken to the boleha. If not, things don't work out. They know that so much time after opening the bohela, after clearing the mangroves, they can begin to plant, and not before this, because it is still as salt, because it still has salt, etc. Many of our comrades today don't have the slightest notion of time. If it is necessary to get up at 5 in the morning, they'll get up at 9. It's necessary to launch an ambush beginning at 4 in the afternoon, but they don't arrive there that day, only showing up the following day and verifying that the targets have already passed by. It's necessary to attack some barracks at 6 in the evening, but they arrive in the late hours of the night. Or again, if they attack were for midday, they arrive in the afternoon and leave it for the following day. They arrive the next day in the same conditions. Our comrades missed attacks or ambushes only because of lateness. not countless times. Some instances of being late are justifiable because our conditions are difficult, but others are only late from lack of interest, lack of consciousness, and lack of order and of decisions. Sometimes one gives a comrade a mission to quickly take a letter to some location. Along the way, he finds some reasons to have fun for 3 to 4 days, although it takes 1 day to arrive. It can't be like this. One cannot win a war this way, much less construct the land. We must have a notion of time. The security, political commissars, etc. Comrades have to be on time everywhere. Let no one come to me saying that he doesn't have a watch, and that's why he can't be on time. We don't need watches to arrive on time. We can decide to meet each other while the sun is high. There is sun in our land. When the rooster sings for the first time, one has to get up. When the sun is fully up, we have to go. A watch isn't necessary in order to respect time, comrades. Watches are for helping comrades a bit more. Our people lived during centuries without watches, but they did what they could, given the economic conditions in which they found themselves. It was not the watch that made the people of Europe advance. No, they wanted to work on time and advance much. Thus they created the watch, the modern watch, because everyone had an ancient watch. It's enough to impale the ground with a stick, and according to the place of the shadow, one can know the hour. This is a sun watch. The shadow of a person can be a watch because in the morning, the shadow is on one side, and in the afternoon, the shadow is on another side. People think they lose their shadow at midday because it is under their feet, but the sun is full and above us. We have to work a lot, comrades, in order to take advantage of time. We have to seek to be practical in our work. We have to install an idea of practicality in the spirit of our comrades. It's necessary to stop complicating things or to lose the magical interpretations of reality in our spirit. That is to say, we still have certain ways of thinking that if we sit down and discuss a matter in which all are in agreement, we think that the thing is already done. We remain content as if we had in fact done the thing, as if we were then necessary to throw a party because the decisions was really good. The discussions were really good, but the discussions finished and everyone leaves satisfied with life because they're going to do a good job, but they don't try to do it because it's only in their head. But if we observe closely, we see that the core responses to our own life. We're convinced that Moors are sorcerers, are capable of pointing out a finger at us and making us fall over. Sooner or later, we'll see that it's a lie, that it's not capable of anything. But that's in our head. We think of it and believe it, and many other things besides these. Likewise, we think about an ambush, and we are very satisfied. But we don't take a single practical measure for everything to run well, without flaws, because everything is good in our head, because we believe in our magical interpretation of reality. Thank you. We have to combat this in our midst, and we all have to do so, as a few of our comrades do. Welcome back, Rocket, if you're still here. We have to discuss, but also to correctly put it into practice properly, without errors, because our misfortune is beginning and not ending. When we start some work, do it with complete enthusiasm. For example, we're going to make an underground storehouse to guard our materials. We began it with enthusiasm, but after a while we stopped and people forgot. Look at how many things in independent Africa have begun but have not been finished. This is because for us it is enough to have a thing in our head, and soon one doesn't think of it anymore. We have planned out so many things in our struggle, in the political sphere, in the military sphere, and instructions in health that we don't do. We begin, but if a single difficulty arises, we don't advance. We have to combat this with vigor, with great vigor. We can't give examples of many things that were begun that weren't finished. The peoples who began something and didn't finish, the organization that began something and didn't finish, did so for either of two reasons. Either they recognized that it wasn't worth doing, or they weren't capable of finishing it. If they recognize that it wasn't worth doing, then they're doing something that they shouldn't be doing. They certainly studied the problem poorly before we began to do something. We should study it well in order to know if it's worth doing or not, and not begin to do it to put it aside later. This is the loss of energy and a waste. Or at times it happens that one can't finish, but whoever can't finish a thing that they began to do is unfortunate in life, because they can't do anything. We have to combat this, comrades. Thus, perfection makes good use of our time, and having practical sense with our accomplishments, the capacity to bring everything that we have done, that we have to do, to completion. Are we very important, fundamental in our culture, comrades? These are new elements of our land's culture. Because even if an entire week were necessary to launch a well-planned ambush, we should do this, whether it takes an entire week or an entire month. We have to recognize our troops in such a way that a group would always be on that road, patrolling, moving, etc. But it always has to be like this. Yeah. If we know, you would like Frantz Fanon, if you already don't know him. If we know that the enemy should pass there, we shouldn't leave it necessary to complete the task. Note, as I told you, arriving, planning a great ambush, then waiting 1, 2, or 3 or 4 hours, and the enemy doesn't come. Some say that they're coming, others that they're not coming, and they finish by heading out. Afterwards, the enemy passes and goes to supply their barracks. It's the same thing on the rivers. The time of attack has to be the appointed time. If not, then why have we an appointed time? An attack was appointed for 5 o'clock, but 6 o'clock, even another day passes and the attack isn't carried out. Why are the comrades playing around? For what? We appointed it for 5 o'clock after having a certainty that it's even at 5. We appointed it at 10 after. We had the certainty that it could be at 10. Moreover, knowing the enemy as we should know it, we know which time is best to attack. We should take maximum advantage of this. We should be capable of issuing our resistance propaganda. This is also a cultural act. We should do so by every means that we arrange. That's the very reason why one of the greatest victories of our party is the Radio Libertocoa, our newspapers, our press, our information, as much within our land as abroad. We all know the strength, the value that our party's broadcasting station has, which issues you propaganda for our people, in which we should be able to improve every day, because that's an essential element, an essential means of our propaganda for propagating our resistance. And in the context of our actions, we should raise high the flag against literacy in our land. We're happy because many comrades have already improved their knowledge in this struggle. Many grown men, is it grown? Yeah. Many grown men of our land learn to read and write, and even more young guys. Today, it is rare for a big group to show up that doesn't have anyone who knows how to read or write. But before, there were many who didn't know how to read or write. There were many big groups in which almost no one knew how to read or write. We should reinforce cooperatives, learning every day. But there are many comrades who have reached the second grade, the first grade, the second year, and even doctors who can pass days on end with other comrades without doing anything, or even resting during spare time, lying down or telling stories, without remembering to say, comrades, you don't know anything. Come here and I am going to teach you. Or if you know a bit, come so I can teach you more than a bit. But the comrades don't think about this. They prefer to tell stories, to stroll through the forests, or in Kokiri, or in Zangunchar, can't say his name, say that place's name, or Dakar. We should work hard to construct our life in our land, comrades. For example, and the party has already begun to do this. We should spread among our people the ideas of cleanliness, of hygiene, as they say. Our people are clean. They like to bathe. They always like to brush their teeth. But not everyone. There are those who don't like these things much and can indeed bathe, but they get themselves into the mud afterward because of certain things. We have to work to show our people that their life, the prolongation of their life, also depends a lot on the cleanliness of their houses. If a people lives mixed up with filth and other things, it's bad because the environment is good for those insects that do harm to humans. They grow at will for those flies and other insects that bring diseases. We should explain the norms of hygiene to our people. This is a fundamental aspect of our culture's resistance. We begin with our health brigades. But to where did these lead us? We accomplished little work in relation to what was necessary to do. But the political commissars should be an agent of hygiene. The commanders of the armed forces should be agents of hygiene. Wherever one arrives, one should demand that they clean themselves. But even in Bok, for example, who pass by encounter everyone dirty and don't say anything. Only one or another worry about cleanliness. It can't be so dirty. It's necessary to clean, to sweep. We have to develop this in our spirit, comrades, cleanliness and hygiene. Every leader or militant of the party should be an agent of hygiene in our land. Wherever one arrives, he has to demand cleanliness, and as a good leader, he should be the first to grab a broom, if necessary, in order to clean, in order to show the others that he is not embarrassed, that he's fighting for his land, giving his life for his struggle, but that he is capable of living amongst filth, because no one gets to cleaning, because to clean is to be demoted. How is it that this can indicate to our people the actual path for rising up and getting out of filth? Because if we want an answer to our struggle, if we can say that our struggle in Guinea and Cape Verde is in order to do away with all wretchedness, then we can also say that it's in order to do away with all messes. We have to put an end to all messes and promiscuity in our midst. We have put an end to this. We will have already advanced a lot in our struggle. Indeed, we have told the comrades to convince our people to make latrines, for example. That's not to say that latrines are what exemplify progress. No, the latrines is no progress. A people that addresses their basic needs in the forest can be more advanced than a people who has latrines. But to the extent to which latrines have been made, they should be advancing they should be advancing in other fields, because when one moves this place of business farther away, they are preventing sickness among the people, because we know that there are places where for a person to pass, he has to hold his nose otherwise. But in other African countries, it's also like this. Even in a few cities, there are places where to pass by it's necessary to hold one's nose. Filth on every side. We who are ready to die in the struggle for the progress and happiness of our people have to be capable of cleaning, because it's easier to clean than to die. Of course, we have to throw away everything in our schools insofar as it was made by the colonialists, everything that exemplifies the colonialist mentality. We have already begun to do it, editing new books speaking of our party, of our struggle, of our land, of the present and future, of our people and our people's rights. We are comrades. There are comrades who think that in order to teach our children, well, we shouldn't speak of our party. What history? The pedagogy that wants that is no pedagogy at all. Pedagogy for us is that which teaches our children about our struggles, the rights of our people, the party and the party anthem, the values of our party, beyond the ABCs, the cat and the fox, the wolf and the kid, etc. But our party should be present, whereas there as well, the direction of the party directors, the force of our struggle, the force of our people, the force of our party, and the duties of our people. At school, in my time, they taught the birth of Jesus Christ, that the Virgin Mary had a baby while remaining a virgin, and even respected that. I even seemed to understand in that time. They taught the miracles of the ascensions in the books espoused at that time, miracles like the miracles of roses and whatnot. If in that time they taught miracles to children, why can't we not teach our land's greatest miracle, that men and women are united to mobilize our people for struggle, to put an end to suffering, to misery, to wretchedness, to blows, kicks, forced labors, etc. Who isn't capable of understanding that? Any little kid is capable of understanding that. And we should make a professor of every party leader and every party militant who is knowledgeable. Comrades, it's not only a professor from the schools who has the obligation to teach everyone, a commander, member of the party, management, political commissars, security commissars, nurse, anyone has the obligation to teach, to always teach, speak or clarifying, explain, speaking or clarifying, explaining, helping. Only thus can we move forward. We should not only leave the work to teaching to professors, we should take advantage of every conversation. Every conversation with a commander, with a comrade. The comrades who deal with me a lot, who know me well, know that it's like this, that I typically act like this in life. Every conversation with a comrade, no matter at what level it may be, should be made into a study, a lesson, one or another learns. All of our conversations have to be a lesson. Thus can we buy time in advance. But if we merely sit around telling stories about some sacred tree from Mosiah, Mansoa, or somewhere else, without thinking about learning, We lose time and we don't advance comrades. We should avoid the superiority complex of those who know something and the inferiority complex of those who don't know. This is because a person who is capable of teaching shouldn't distance themselves from anyone, especially from our people now. On the contrary, one should constantly immerse himself more among our people. I explain to the comrades, for example, to the comrades who go to study and return, quote, until now, there have been two tendencies. One is from those who come, who infiltrate our people, but get so muddled with our people that they only make the same mistakes as our people. Others come from graduated engineers, and later they want to be directors. Was it Bamboo's Kayeti on Conte who ran things? But how? Babo isn't at my level. I am an engineer, and he hardly went to school. He had to wait outside. He only committed errors. He messed up our party work, ruined everything, etc. Those are the two extremes that we don't want. What we want is for those who left to study, who acquired more knowledge, to respect our directors because they are in fact the directors, even if they don't go to school. But if one saw some deficiency, one should delve into the middle of the comrades in order to help, to constantly raise, to improve the level of our thinking, of our things. This is what it means for a person to know more, who understand more than others, and who comes to help us mingle with and muddle around with ourselves. But don't forget that it's necessary to help raise up more each day. We should combat everything insofar as it may be opportunism, even in culture. For example, there are comrades who think that in order to teach in our land, it's fundamental to still teach in Creole. Then others think that it is better to teach in Fula or Mandinga or Balantea. This is very pleasant to hear. If the Balantas hear this, they will be very happy, but it's no longer possible. How are we going to write in Balantas now? Who knows Balantas phonics? One still doesn't know, and it's necessary to study first, even Creole. For example, I write N-E-A na bui na be. That's a different language, everybody. Another could write, for example, Nankan no Kubuka. I'm trying. It makes no difference. One can't teach like this. In order to teach a written language, it's necessary to have a certain way of writing. It's so that everyone writes in the same way. Otherwise, it's a diabolic mess. But many comrades with a sense of opportunism want to move forward with Creole. We're going to do that, but after studying a lot. Now our language for writing is Portuguese. That is why it's worth it to talk to each other here as much in Portuguese as in Creole. We're not better children of our land if we speak Creole. That is not true. But the children of our land is the one who abides by the party's law, the party's order, in order to serve our people well. No one should have a complex because one doesn't know Balanta, Mandinga, Pepel, Fula, or Mancana. Those are all languages that I cannot repeat. Sorry, everybody. If one knows, even better. But if one doesn't know, one has to make sure that others understand, even if by gestures. But if one is working hard in the party, one moves forward because who knows more Manjako than the traitor Jacquin Batitian? Who knows more Fula than the traitor Sin? Who knows more Fula hypocrisies than the traitor Tachirano Roched? Comrades, be patient. But who knows more Bolanta than the traitor Fabu? These are all, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm not good at pronouncing these things. We have to have the courage to report clear things to comrades. Our values are right, but without opportunism. We have to have a real sense of our culture. Portuguese, the language, is one of the best things that the Tagus left us, because language isn't evidence of anything, but an instrument for men to relate with one another. A means for speaking, to express realities of life and of the world. Just as man invented the radio to speak at a distance without speaking with language, but only with signals. So through the time of his development, man began to speak. The necessities of intercommunicate made him begin to speak. He developed vocal cords, etc., until he could speak. And as language depends on the environment in which one lives, every people create their own language. If we notice, for example, the people who live near the sea, their language has many things related to the sea. For those who live in the forest, their language has many things related to woodlands. A people that lives in the forest, for example, does not know how to say boat. It's familiar with boats and don't live on the sea. For example, in the language of certain European peoples, they say things about the sea or about navigation in Portuguese, because the Portuguese live along the sea. Everything has its reasons. Language is an instrument that man creates through labor, I agree, through struggle, in order to communicate with others. And this gave him a great new strength, because no one was close in on himself anymore. They began to speak with one another. Men with men, societies with societies, people with people, country with country, continent with continent. How wonderful. Language has the first natural means of communication that exists. But the world advanced a lot. We didn't advance as much as the world. Our language remained at the level of that world to which we arrive, in which we live. Whereas the Tagu, although he was a colonialist living in Europe, had a language that advanced a good bit more than others, being able to express concrete and relative truths. For example, with science. For example, we speak like this: the moon is the Earth's natural satellite. They say this in Balante. They say it in Mankanhu. It's necessary to talk a lot in order to say it. It's possible to say it, but it's necessary to talk a lot until it becomes clear that a satellite is a thing that revolves around another, whereas in Portuguese, one word suffices. Speaking like that, any people in the world understand. And mathematics, we want to learn mathematics, don't we? Take, for example, a square root of 36. How does one say square root in Balanti? It's necessary to tell the truth in order to really understand. I say, for example, the intensity of a force is equal to mass times the acceleration of gravity. How are we going to say this? How does one say acceleration of gravity in our language? It doesn't exist in Creole. We have to say it in Portuguese. But for our lands to advance, every child of our land in the next few years has to know what the acceleration of gravity is. I won't explain this now because there is no time and we have a lot of work. But comrades, tomorrow, in order to seriously advance, not only the directors, but also all of the 9-year-olds have to know what the acceleration of gravity is. In Germany, for example, all the children know this. There are many things that we can say that we can't say in our language, but there are people who want us to put the Portuguese language to the side because we're Africans and we want and we don't want a foreigner's language. Those people want their mind to advance. They don't want to make their people advance. We of the party, if we want to lead our people forward for a long time to come, to write, to advance in science, our language has to be Portuguese. And this is an honor. It's the only thing we can appreciate from the Tagus, because he left this language after having stolen so much from our land, until an actual day in which, having deeply studied Creole, finding all the good phonetics, rules of Creole, we could begin to write Creole. But we don't prohibit anyone from writing in Creole. If someone wants to write in Creole, if someone wants to write a letter to their love in Creole, they can write it. It's only that in the response one sends, one is going to write in a different way, but making itself clearly understood. But for science, Creole doesn't yet suffice, even in Balenta. I remember a comrade of ours who unfortunately died, Ango. We would write in Portuguese and then switch to Creole. And he would write in Balenta. This is because it's possible to write in Balenta. A person who knows enough Portuguese is capable of writing Balenta. They say, for example, Wantana, quote unquote, or at times in Kolesa. These are different languages, sorry, buddy. I'm destroying all these languages. Sorry. I know how to write it, but I write it in my way. Yet another person writes it in their way. Even Dejurama in Fuli can be written with a D or a J. Or it can be written only with an J. But we read Dejurama because the J at the beginning of the word is elevated, is equivalent to DJ. But we have to set up a rules of the Mandinga, or in other languages. It's necessary to first set a rule. It has to be like this, comrades, because we have to take absolute advantage of other people's experiences, not only our own experiences. But if we want to employ that experience in order to utilize in our land, we have to utilize the expressions of other languages. Well, if we have a language that can explain all this, let's use it. It does no harm. For us, using Portuguese like Russian, French, and English doesn't matter as long as it serves us. Just as using tractors for the Russians, English, Americans, etc. doesn't matter as long as they serve us in cultivating the land while gaining our independence. That's because language is an instrument. But it might happen that we already have a language that works and that everyone understands. So we're not going to make everyone learn Russian. That's not worth it, especially since we have the Creole language, which is similar to Portuguese. If in our schools we teach our students how Creole comes from Portuguese, and from Africa, anyone will know Portuguese much more quickly. Creole impairs those who learn Portuguese because they do not know what linkage exists between Portuguese and Creole. But if they become familiar in the linkage that exists, this I gotta read it. I can't do this word. I'm gonna make sure. I keep wanting to say something, but I don't know what it is. Thanks for everybody who stayed around. Appreciate it. I kind of like reading out loud because it helps me. Oh my God, facilitates in learning Portuguese. We have to end all of our people's indifferences in cultural matters, with steadfastness. In our discussions, and our determination to do things. That's discussions, not decisions. Right? It's this decisions. We have already managed to combat this, and we should not avoid something because it's from a foreigner, or again because it's foreign. We appreciate all being so consistent, sharing these books. Yeah, no worries. Thank you for showing up. Because it's foreign. It is already good, and we have to accept it immediately. Then it's not worth refusing. That's not culture. It's wild. It's a complex. Be it one of the inferiority or unintelligence. Faced with things from the foreigner, we should know how to accept what is acceptable and refuse what it isn't useful. We have to be capable of raising criticism. And if you will notice, in a part of our action or our struggle has been the consistent application of the principle of a critical assimilation. That is, unveiling ourselves of others, but criticizing what can be useful for our land and that which cannot, accumulating experience and creating. These are a few aspects of our cultural resistance in the culture sphere, of which I wanted to speak to you, comrades. That's the end of that one. Let's move on to chapter 6, armed resistance. Before I move on, anybody have any questions? Doesn't look like it. I know Joe can't speak because I think their partner's taking a nap. They had a rough day today. All right, let's move on. So now we did cultural resistance, and now we're doing armed resistance. Comrades, a part of my work yesterday and today has detected to clearly put forward the problem of our resistance in general as a response to Portuguese colonial oppression, and to define, although quickly, various forms of our struggles resistance. Every form being a type of response to the type of Portuguese oppression. Politics, response, political resistance, economic oppression, responses, economic resistance, cultural oppression, responses, cultural resistance. Here only missing, take a bit about our armed resistance, which is a response to armed oppression, to colonialist aggression. The comrades clearly know about this in general. It is more visible than the other types of resistance. We already talk about the beginning of our armed resistance. We told the comrades that our armed resistance, on the one hand, is a political act because the war that we're waging in our land is a response to the Tages war. But above all, it is the only way we found to win our political rights, the self-determination for our people to determine their own destinies and to advance like other peoples of the world in the path of progress. Even today, you'll remember that our armed resistance is also an expression of cultural resistance, because with our armed resistance and risk our lives every day, we negate the situation of second-class Portuguese people, if not of third-class people, or of the Portuguese dogs that the Portuguese colonialist foreigners would like to impose. We who, through the labor of our party, acquire the awareness that we're a part of the African people, that we belong to this continent called Africa, that although we're men, like all other men, profoundly tied to humanity, our destiny is first of all tied to Africa, and as Africans and as men, we have the right to be dignified and free life, like the people of Portugal or any other people in the world. Our personality isn't confused with the personality of the Tages, although some of us may have children from Tages or descendants from Tages mixed with Africans. And although we don't scorn the Tages, we want our dignity, our personality, and not only in defense of our rights, but also of that which is the legitimate basis of our people's culture. We even show the comrades that at the end of the day, our armed resistance can be interpreted as a prolongation of our people's resistance in Guinea, particularly because Guinea was conquered by the Tages, to the war of colonial conquest, which took almost 50 years of our land. Today we take up arms again, continue the work of our ancestors, who didn't want to lose their right to direct themselves from their own life. The relations to Cape Verde we can interpret our struggle, which is still political today, but possibly armed tomorrow, as well as the prolongation of the resistance of others, Africans, the children of Guinea, or of any other side of Africa close to Guinea, who were taken to Cape Verde as slaves, and who as slaves resisted and suffered, negating the fighting against the Tagu slave drivers who sold them in America, in Brazil, and in other parts of the world, as if they were insects. Thus, we should conclude that the primary aspect of our armed resistance is the prolongation of a struggle, in a sense of the defense of our dignity as Africans. We have therefore the traditions of struggle in order to defend our freedom, the rights of our society and our own history, in order to follow the path of progress like any other people in the world. We know who we are. We already spoke about this a lot. We clearly define our situation geographically, economically, culturally, and socially before after the Tagus arrived in our land. That is, before the colonial situation and after the colonial situation. Part of the colonial situation is to take away the indigenous cultures, languages, and also their teachings, and their ways of their spirituality. It's to take that away. We're part of the set of peoples of the African continent who, from the moment that the path from Asia, from the Orient, through the Mediterranean, was closed off by the Turkish Empire, which conquered the southern Europe, Eastern Europe, and Asia Minor, encountering Europe because Europe, surrounded by the Turks, needed to open new paths in order to reach the riches of Asia that they were used to buying, negotiating over, and exploiting. From this moment on, and because they were situated at the tip of Africa upon the sea, the Portuguese in particular initiated their so-called discoveries, navigation. The Tagu wildly thought himself to be God, who parted the seas in order to discover lands, in order to discover new worlds. This is a lie. The Tagus headed out to sea first because they were seaside. Secondly, because Portugal was poor and had a lot of people to employ as sailors, contrary to other countries in Europe, which had fewer people available for life on the sea. And thirdly, but fundamentally, because Europe had an absolute necessity of heading out to sea to look for a path to the Indies. No God outlined a way to the sea for the Tagus. It's enough to see that after this finished, the Tagus become poor, wretched, and had a smaller navy than other countries in the world that didn't have a navy. We should put this clearly, which were the facts that led to our contact with the Tagus, colonial people from Portugal. At the outset of Tagus had contact with African peoples on the basis of equality, and in a few cases, even on the basis of inferiority of the Tagus, because a few African countries at the time were truly more developed than Portugal. We already told you that the king of Ghana, for example, or the Mambusa, or the Melendia on the eastern African coast, and the king of the Congo were a bit frightened at the mystery of the Tagus, with the presence that their king gave them compared to the presents that they could give to the king of Portugal. There are beautiful letters that the king of Portugal wrote to the king of Africa to petition good relations with them, lauding them, offering themselves with respect. And this was already been demonstrated. The Portuguese king always gave their hidden orders, recommending that their people take note on the best way to trick or to steal, etc. The Tagus had relations with us Africans, commercial relations, in the coast of our African lands, on the basis of equality and of respect. Even after a good while in Guinea, for example, there were signs agreements between the papal kings and the Portuguese for businesses. In in order to trade in our land or in other parts of Africa. The Tagus pay taxes, like other countries, as a matter of fact, which later transformed into colonialist and imperialist countries. Later, little by little, Europe transformed itself into advanced It advanced from a commercial point of view. It developed industrially. Above all, England, new needs were created in Europe with the great development of capitalism, accumulation of capital, the need for new raw materials, so they could develop even more, and so they could respond to Europe's miseries, and at the same time the necessity of markets, so they could sell things that Europe produced. Before this, because of the war that existed in Africa, even between Africans themselves, all lands areas was also an area of many wars. Above all, from the Futu Dajon inland, where various aristocratic military African states fought among each other in order to conquer terrains and pastures, farming, etc. There were many prisoners of war who were used as slaves. Even in Africa, the social and economic system was one of slavery, although with its own characteristics, a different from slavery on other continents. The system of slavery still exists today in Africa. While things have gotten a little better, the boys of the small territories leaders are no more than slaves, comrades. The boys of some of our lands, great in the forests, are like slaves. They're giving food. They have children, but all of the children are raised by the same great man. Their children are always servants. This is called slavery. For we Africans, regarding our ideal of slavery, we are open to arranging slaves for other people. Yeah. Arranging. Yeah. At that time, America had been discovered and not discovered. and sometime later, it began to be colonized. Brazil and South America, islands like Cuba, Jamaica, and so-called West Caribbean islands. Some countries in Latin America, above all, in Central America. And as I said, North American colonized by the English. In Brazil and in the southern parts of North America, where the climate was a bit harsh, even quite abnormal, agriculture took a path acquiring serious labor, and the Europeans who left Europe in order to be colonized were really thin because they were expelled from Europe, persecuted because of their religion, because of the class struggle in Europe. So these people, not wanting to pick up the hoe to cultivate the earth, went out around the world to procure people to cultivate for them. Africa was an open field for this because slavery existed in Africa, and the Africans were accustomed to buying and selling slaves. And so, the Tagus navigators and the Atlantic Ocean of others, like the French and Dutch, etc., accustomed to pirating on the sea instead of stealing by sea, or on land instead of pirating, began to buy or to hunt slaves in Africa in order to sell them in America or the New World. The new type of commerce began, slavery. Slavery lasted for quite some time, during which more than 100 million Africans were sold around the world, many of whom, in large part, according to investigations, died in the middle of the ocean from frailty or in shipwrecks. African men and women were carried to different points of the world, above all to America. After a while, quarrels began between the English and also a few other countries of Europe on the one hand, and America on the other hand, due to the economic competition. This is because America raised itself up on the basis of capacity, those of slave labor. Whereas in England, for example, which did not have slaves, it was necessary to pay a salary for a hard day's work. Thus, England, there arose the ideal of ending slavery, not as a feeling of humanity, but as an economic necessity for combating the advance of American development. Great theories were thrown around that slavery was a crime against humanity. It's true, it is a crime, but it was a crime a long time ago. It's necessary to end slavery. Great propaganda, international meetings, etc., until they reached the point in which slavery was prohibited. But Portugal, which was already stubborn in that time, was continuing with its business of slavery for quite some time, with a good-sized repository of slaves on the Cape Verde Islands and in the Atlantic Ocean. Others were taken to Portugal. In Portugal, there were places that have black names because there were many slaves there. For example, there is a Paco dos, can't say that because they used the color black, they used the N-word, because there were many black people guarded as slaves there, and after the end of slavery, they became free, continued to live in Portugal. Even the Aladencio there is a village where there were many biracial people, ascendants from Africans, and Marquez de Pombal sent there in order to populate the Aladencio, combating slavery in Europe. The ideal of slaves, freedom advanced in America, and slavery was prohibited in the world. Not really. In North America, the North was industrialized and the South produces raw materials on the basis of the slave labor force. In order to defend the industrial and economic interests of the North, the idea of putting an end to slavery arose in order to remove the great lords, masters of lands and slaves of the South, the capacity of life that harmed the interests of the industrial masters of the North. Thus Lincoln, president of North America, decided to put an end to slavery. Yeah, he was forced. There was a war due to this. The South immediately declared that it no longer made up part of the United States, that it didn't want any federations whatsoever, and that it was going to be an independent state, keeping its slaves. War arose, and hard war between Americans and Americans, saying that it was due to the slaves, because the North wanted to liberate the slaves, which is not true. Lie. Oh, great. The North wanted to put an end to I'm gonna make sure. I'm saying it says let's see, I'm trying to pronounce it, but I have a hardest time pronouncing. I think it has something to do with my learning disability. I have to hear it first sometimes. I do try still though. Watch me know what it is. Prerogative. Just like different prerogatives of the South, which had slaves and they didn't have them. If any study is well, we'll even notice that the Europeans' origins in North America were of one sort, and in the South they were of another sort. Names of the lands in the North have a certain origins, and in the South have another. In the South, there were terms from France and from other countries, because Americans, as you all know, weren't from America. Americans, in fact, are the indigenous people, almost all of whom were unalived in Europe by Europeans. And so-called indigenous people were not, they said the I word at all. They were the color skin. They used the I word because when Christopher Columbus discovered America, which he didn't, he thought that he arrived in India. And when he saw people, he called them the I word. And this name stuck. But they weren't the I word at all. Comrades, a new phase in the world rose, in which slavery came to an end. The world became transformed with this, but slavery really didn't end. It hasn't ended. Nevertheless, capitalism developed a lot of Europe with great accumulation of capital, industrial development, the need for raw materials, and as I told you, the need for markets, and so some of the more developed European states settled on the following: to take Africa. In fact, to put an end to the history of small businesses, small contracts, and respect for Africans. European states, England, Germany, France, and Belgium, for example, began to quarrel in order to see who was going to take Africa. They looked for ways to partition Africa. First, on the basis of the companies that were created. After that, by means of the states themselves, and then through colonial wars of occupation. The history is long. I am not going to narrate everything, but that's how our land became colonies, occupied by colonialists. But from that moment on, whether or not we're developing or advancing in relations to Europe, our history stopped. We began to be dragged by the history of European countries. Our history, our freedom, and the freedom of our productive forces were taken and stifled by the colonialists. They clearly had great ease with this course because we were always divided. You know that in Guinea, for example, the Tagas fought against us, one by one, defeating us one by one, race by race, utilizing some races against others. We can say that if by chance some Manjokos hadn't helped the Tagus against our own Manjakos, perhaps it would have been difficult for the Tagas to conquer the Manjakos. We can say that if the Fulas hadn't helped the Tagus against the Papals, and above all, if Geronimo Barreto hadn't tricked the Papals of Bissau, serving the Tagus, then perhaps Conrad the Tagus wouldn't have settled in our land. Many people don't quite understand the roles of Geronimo Barreto played in the conquest of Guinea by the Tagus. Geronimo Barreto, son of Lady Rosa de Cautes, wife of Joe Barreto of San Diego, Cape Verde, sergeant of a troop of Portuguese men, black, born in Guinea, and descendant of Cape Verdeans, a mixture between Cape Verdean and Manjakos. As a matter of fact, they say that Lady Rosa is the daughter of a Cape Verdean and a Manjaco, and she, Lady Rosa, has taken to Cape Verde, the master of Chaku and of indigenous peoples of Africa, from the side of Texera, Pento, or Kachu, I can't say these names right, etc. To the end of Casamassa. That is, until the river that in that time was called the San Domingos River, and that is the Casamaras River today. She was so affectionate among the Africans that everything she said was accepted. She was particularly the master of commerce. Her son, Geronimo Barreto, was educated first in Cape Verde and afterwards in Portugal. He didn't finish his studies, was a good guitar player, a bit of a playboy. He returned to Guinea in order to take care of the country's things. Juan Barreto had been a prisoner before this because he launched a revolt against the governor, who was there because he was a Democrat, not for independence, but in the favor of other Portuguese people who were Democrats. After the death of his father, Geronimo Honoreo Barreto took care of the family's things, and he was the richest man in Guinea, facing the revolt of the Papals. In that time, Guinea and Cape Verde had only one government, with the headquarters in Praia, I think so. The governor general of Cape Verde and Guinea made a proposal to the queen, who was Di Maria in that time, in which they said that if she wanted Guinea to remain peaceful and Portugal to be the serious force in Guinea to put an end to the wars, it was better to install Honorario Barreto as governor. He wrote this to Di Maria and said, quote, I have the honor to propose to our queen to choose as a governor of Guinea, although under my orders the young man named Honorario Barreto, learned, intelligent, who frequently attends schools, etc., and who is a Portuguese as any of us. And I advise this because, being the richest person in Guinea, he has the greatest interest in conserving the presence of Portugal in Guinea. The queen saw this, and Honorario Barreto was named governor for Guinea. Barreto established his working plan to conquer Guinea by the Tagus. If he could really take Chowk and Gambé and Bissau for the Tagus, no one else would be capable of taking Guinea, and they could dominate all of the indigenous revolts. He saw this plan very well with intelligence, but when, for example, the Portuguese were gripped by anger at him because he was black and commanded, he played a great trick. He abandoned everything and returned to his property in Cachu and closed himself up in his house. When the Portuguese had difficulties with the indigenous people, they went to call for him in order to avoid the Papables revolting against them. He returned. One time, for example, the king of Item, whose name was Di Dongo, one of the strongest papal kings around Amera, San Jose de Basu fortress with his people, and it was in that way that the Portuguese died of hunger. There inside, no one could leave. The ships didn't arrive in Bissau. Honorario Barreto was in Cashu, and they went to call for him. People from Cape Verde, Tagus, who were in Cape Verde, came to call for him. He accepted this and came to speak with the papal king and promised him that his rights would be respected, that Portugal would in no way take his land, and that he would pay him taxes, etc. A written contract was drawn up. Meanwhile, the Tagus arranged the great forces would leave from Portugal, from Lisbon and Guinea. When they arrived, they massacred the Papals on the largest scale. Another time in a contract to not bother the Tagus, that Barreto made with the ruler of Dajun di Rey, the island in front of Basu. The following promise was made, that the king wouldn't meddle with the Tagus and he couldn't make war against them. The Tagus were going to give him so many firearms, so many iron bars and litters of sugarcane per year. This is a signed contract achieved in Lisbon, which I read. I am giving you an idea of how Barreto, in fact, knew how to serve Portugal well. With his plan, he was in fact able to place Guinea in his hands, to deliver it over or not to the Tagus, according to what he might want. Because in that time, in which he had Guinea completely in his hands, the English and the French, who also wanted Guinea, appeared as well. The English wanted Bolema, and the French wanted to come down from Casamanacia, can't say it, descending and taking everything. Barreto was a great Portuguese parrot. He resisted with strength, accepted neither promise nor offers that the French and English made to him. He guarded all of Guinea from the Tagus, and the Tagus are right to put a statue of Barreto in our land. Without Barreto in Guinea, there wouldn't be any Tagus. That this is true, but we should have respect for Barreto. he can we can criticize him in his attitude, but he was a man of valor for that time. That with that mentality, as an individual who left our people, but who was educated by the Portuguese, among the Portuguese, speaking Portuguese well, playing his guitar, singing fado, etc. He didn't have anything else to do. If not this, comrades, this was his job, and he did it well. Thus, he was a man of valor. We can't understand some of our lineages today without Barreto. For example, like Alvarenga, because Lady Rosa called herself Rosa. Alvarenga, Juan Barreto, and Rosa. Alvarenga, sorry, bore the name, oh my gosh, Carvalho Hose, Alvarenga, so and so Barreto, joining a whole two families, forming fine people of our land, like our comrades Barreto, seated over there. But today, in the face of this new phenomenon of the struggle of our people, and for the independence of Africa, the independence of the whole world, with the struggle of liberation everywhere, we can understand how any descendant of Jorge Barreto could still favor the Tagus. If Jorge Barreto could serve the Tagus, then perhaps any one of us would have preferred to do it. If we had his education, and if we had lived in the historical moment in which he lived, but today Jorge Barreto's descendants, whether or not they went to school, if they still favor the Tagus, then those people don't yet have forgiveness. Thus, you comrades, see where we have departed from, and how we fell into the Tagus' hands. When it comes to Cape Verde, you comrades know there was no conquest of Cape Verde. Cape Verde doesn't consist of islands, of where found in that time by the Tagus. After they happened upon the tip of Africa, where today Dakar is located, and given its greenery, well, at the time it was discovered, it was quite green, and it's a cape that is a piece of land that enters the sea from inland. They called it Cape Verde. Today we call it the tip of Dakar. After a few days heading out to sea, they came across some islands, and as they were close to Cape Verde, every island took its own name. That which was discovered in the month of May, they called Ali Damoi. That which was discovered on the day of St. James was the Ilha de Santiago, that which had already salty terrain became, oh my gosh, Ilha del Sal, another, because it was long and beautiful. They called it Ilha da Boa Vista, etc. According to the Tagus, Christianity according to their way of seeing. But you know that they call the region in which Dakar is located Region de Cape Verde. In Dakar, one sees a lot of things where Cape Verde is written, and people think that Cape Verde is there, and it's because of this that I'm giving you this explanation. There are no one in Cape Verde that at the time in which it was discovered, quote unquote, but there is a hypothesis in which Cape Verde had people before, particularly people from the African coast, and many Manjacos as Lisbu fishermen from the coast of Senegal, who reached as far as Cape Verde, navigating in their canoes. And today, these canoes are tested, and they're able to navigate long distance like the Numhomek canoes, for example. Moreover, there is a historical hypothesis that Phoenicians were an ancient people who inhabited the land of the Lesbians, who we call Syrians, who are in Asia Minor, and who made the so-called tour around Africa. They say that they got to Cape Verde, and they lived there. The truth is that when the Tagus came across the island of Cape Verde in the middle of the sea, they didn't find anyone there. And when slavery thrived, they resolved to bring slaves there to make Cape Verde a repository of slaves. When slavery began to come to an end, every island was placed in the hands of an important white man, a sir something or other, as an administrative recipient, master of the islands, who made it so that slaves would be exploited as slaves, or anyhow exploited as servants, as serfs in the house of the land and the land's master. This was the point from where we started, the situation of the Tagus created in Africa. Knowing our starting point well, we have to know clearly where we are going with our armed struggle. Our armed struggle, we have say, is a form of political struggle that seeks to liberate our land from imperialist colonial economic exploitation. This is our fundamental objective, to liberate our land, productive forces from oppression, from imperialist colonial domination. But one question, are we doing this to return to where we were, to return to Cape Verde as slaves or as serfs, or with people serving as servants? Are we doing this to return to the time when which the Manjacos and the Papals quarreled a lot, in which the Mandingas and the Balantes didn't get along? This is a bit difficult. No, we're liberating our land to advocate like other peoples of the world to progress for a life of dignity, for a land of unity nationally, so we can help to raise up a new and better Africa. That's the objective of our struggle in context of the world and of humanity, to which we belong as human beings. In our struggles, therefore, any shot of Buddha's barracks, or a shot taken at some Tagu on the road or in an ambush, it's a political act of great magnitude. We're serving humanity, comrades. We're serving our people, our land, Africa, and humanity. This is our responsibility to shoot, to wage war in our lands, in order to liberate our people. For this reason, we have to orient our armed struggle in the best way possible, in accordance with our land's reality and the accordance with the experience of our people, as well as long as that experience can be validated for us. For this reason, we have to avoid, and we do avoid, everything in our struggle insofar as it might diminish the dignity of the human being. In our struggle, our party prohibits everything that might be a crime, everything that in our spirit might be hateful or a desire for blood. We spill blood, and we have hatred for the colonialists who dominate us, knowing that we're doing clearly in order to not confuse us, comrades. This is why we have difficulties with our brothers and the Philippines joining us, because according to them, when someone is killed in war, it is necessary to cut off their head and ears. This is a bit difficult for us. It is easy for the Tagus. This is why our war is very different from many wars in Africa. Comrades, our enemy, who is criminal in the worst senses, barbaric, for the worst kind of people, from the worst people to appear on earth, feels shame before the purity and elevated consciousness of our armed struggle for national liberation. In our struggles, we have to combat all false ideas, all ideas of opportunism, and we have to defend our party line to the utmost, as you all know. Our party realized that it was necessary to mobilize and organize a people for struggle, and it mobilized the people. This had to be the first phase of our struggle, and we carried it out well, comrades. We create armed groups almost naturally, rooted among our people, supported by our people. These groups grew little by little. We acted against the enemy, developing our struggle step by step, creating new types of fighting groups, improving our weapons, and always supported by our people. We did the most. We did the most we could to understand the war in every part of our land, and today are only bringing the armed struggle to islands remain. Bissau Islands, Bolama Islands, and Banjogos archipelagos, and the Cape Verde archipelagos. There is no longer any place in our land where we haven't waged armed struggle. Even in Bissau, we are already attacking Bolema, and the Tagus said this on the radio. Throughout our armed struggle and armed resistance, we have to be able to conserve our forces, but to also develop our forces every day. Those who wage an armed resistance but aren't able to conserve their forces and constantly develop and grasp them will lose them, because one either develops and advances an armed struggles forces, or they disappear. Or then they disappear. There you go. To always be in action is the best way to develop forces. The armed resistance is almost like gymnastics. However, whoever has the most strength can perform the most gymnastics, the most action, the most movement. Unfortunately, many of our comrades don't understand this, and they are capable of wasting more and more time without taking any action, thus killing our armed forces, because the less actions a combatant undertakes, the more difficulties he has in undertaking other actions. Real quick, since we got like 10 minutes, let me look at something. 159. Looking ahead. It's probably gonna have to stop somewhere. Yep. Oh wait, 165. Where am I at? 165. All right. Let's do this. Step by step, we managed to lead our people to take up arms in 3 phases. First phase, a few of our people's children, rather in the forest or in the city, as guerrillas. Little by little, we increased the number of guerrillas. We transformed the guerrilla forces into regular army. But afterwards, even in the villages, we put arms in the hands of the people as militia. And today, little by little, we should put arms in the hands of our entire people, our people in the liberated areas, at least, the people in arms. That should be fundamental characteristics of our armed resistance, of the people that struggle for its liberty. What is the objective? What is the objective? To destroy the enemy forces, to arrange all necessary means to destroy the vital forces of enemy. The war is hard. It's not pleasant, but yeah. But no one wages war because of taste. Only criminal kills because of the taste for killing. But the war is for killing, comrades. Whoever kills more in the war and whoever makes fewer errors wins the war. That's why the objective of our armed resistance is liquidating the enemy's vital forces. Our obligation to liquidate the colonialist Tagus, which Tagus might bear arms against our people's liberty, should be liquidated. And through our struggle, we should orient our labor in such a way as to lose less of our strength. In fact, our party has sought to use fighting tactics beyond our general strategies in such a way as to avoid as much as possible our comrades dying in war. In our war, we should do what is possible in every stage, but preparing ourselves today to be better in the following stages. This has been a norm of our party. We've recommended maximum caution to our comrades in acting against the enemy in the moments in which we can actually act, because the land is ours. But we should always act because it's always possible to act in certain conditions that we ourselves can create. As much as possible, we have sought to conserve the life of our comrades. And we can say that a large part of the comrades that we already lost in our struggle was due to errors committed by their own comrades. Errors of vigilance, errors of war calculation, or even disobedience of the party's watchwords. Carelessness on paths that can be mined carelessness across rivers that can be enemy boats. Countless times comrades arrived to cross a river, and instead of communicating with the well-marked other side in order to watch out for enemy, they arrive, get in their canoes and cross over. Along the way, they encounter the Tagus. Even I, when crossing the Furman River, returned from the north of our land before arriving on to the other side. An enemy boat appeared in the corner of the river. When our feet touched the ground amidst the mangroves, the boat came behind us, and we knew that Comrade Luis Cabral had to get into the water, almost dying with his other comrades, because the enemy boat was on top of them. And how many of our comrades lost their lives because of this? Only carelessness, inattention, uncertainty that one only does something well if it has been studied well. There's too much trust in luck. There were comrades who died in bombardments, for example, due to the inattention, carelessness with planes, and refusal to follow the party's rules, to make shelter, to leave the bases. People died in war. It's normal, but to die in war. Whoever heads into war knows that they can live or die, but they'll die more or less depending on the errors that they commit, depending on whether or not they follow the directions of the party line, or of who directs the line, so that they can preserve their life. And preserving life doesn't mean cowardice. It doesn't mean denying the war. So many comrades already died outside of the war during the struggle, but so many comrades have also already died abroad, and perhaps if they had been in our land, they wouldn't have died. Comrades who are sometimes on the front lines for years one day drop that they're doing and going to their village. Just when they arrive, the Tagus kill us. So we shouldn't be afraid of dying in war, but dying with success, with unity, not dying for nothing, only because one trusts luck. We're proud of the fact that in the war compared with other wars, whether in Africa or outside of Africa, very few people have died. Very few people in respect to those who could have died given their concrete conditions. Our party has known how to orient the struggle, reducing to minimum the loss of our comrades. And we have done the most we could for the recuperation of those who are injured. This is one of the strengths of our struggle. So we shouldn't only defend ourselves, always acting, because the best defense in armed struggles like ours is action. That best defense is offense. But we should also defend all of our struggles' achievements. Although we shouldn't confuse remaining attached to terrain only to defend and liberated areas, instead of moving forward and attacking the Tagus in our barracks. We should create our own means of defending liberating areas, but the liberated areas can't impede us from advancing on the enemy to strike them constantly. To the extent that the war advances, our party has been able to transform our war structure. Our comrades should really bear in mind our struggles was at the outset, little by little. We modified our guerrilla groups. We created armed corps, our military units. We created commandos. We began to coordinate the struggle in the framework of zones of different regions. Before, for example, the Armed Forces Command was a party committee. But to the extent that our armed forces grew, the war advanced, and we had to separate local directorate from the party directorate of armed forces. Although those who direct the armed forces were also the party leaders, we created a strike force, an army corps, moving through sectors of struggle, etc. And all this shows the comrades how our struggle has been dynamic. And one of the strengths of our struggle is the following: we've never let our struggles crystallize that is, stop at a given stage of evolution. On the contrary, we've always known how to adapt the struggle to its new conditions. We've known how to move from the pistol to the mortar, but that has also modified every structure until we reach the mortar. We've known how to change the types of struggles, move to new battlefronts in the moment in which it was necessary to do so. Of course, sometimes in our conditions, this was a bit late, but sometimes we committed errors, such as, for example, when we created overcrowding units that we called sections, which we later had to reduce, for example, etc., which we later had to divide because there were too many people for the leadership at that time. We couldn't do it. We stuck with the big group. But we should say that in a war like ours, in a land like ours, the best way to fight is with few people divided into small groups. Consider the attack of a few days ago in Penchi. After the meeting we had with the comrades in Gabu, we were happy with comrades Barao Sadi with the attack that he launched, but we told him that he could still do better. He actually got fed up at the whim. He and Boitu na Sanesi, who is his political commissar, after meeting, he returned with his combatants and attacked Penchi with two groups of 18 people entering outside of the Tagus barracks, grabbing the Tagus outside the shelter, blowing up a few houses, etc. That is, we're still certain that in this struggle, the best way to fight is with small groups and with a lot of courage, getting the most out of our arms above all our small arms comrades. Unfortunately, since we have mortars, as already told you, the infantry comrades take some liberties, and the Panchugats bullets are rusting in their carriers. But you see, the party directorates was struggling, and you know that it was what it was doing. For example, it was removing people from the infantry, bringing them to other army corps, and taking them to other places. And our comrades and director comrades unfortunately understood this clearly in order to help us. It is not worth it to have 5 big groups to throw the Tagus out of the Buba area or the Kambakare area when if we join 2 big groups two on one side and 3 on the other, making 5 in order to throw the Tagus out of the Babu area or the Kakokarava area. Sorry, I can't say these words too well. We can then take them to the north in order to, for example, to reinforce our actions in the Mekajang land or in Nakra, which is incredibly important for us. So we should do this at every step, yesterday as today and tomorrow, while our struggle lasts. Coordinate our struggle, dominate our struggle completely, knowing what's going on. We should do everything so that the relations between our armed forces and our people might be the best possible. We should convince our people by our gestures, by our actions, by our words, that our soldiers, our combatants, are their children who struggle to defend them, who go out because their heart and because of their guts in order to defend them, not to do them any harm. Various comrades of the armed forces, even leaders, have harmed our party and our struggle a lot, running the relations of our armed forces with the population. This, as I already told you, is a crime of treason. It serves the Tagus. We have to be hard in combating this in all seriousness. And I can say the following to the comrades, no matter how much strength our party has. If we don't defend good relations with our people every day, if we don't reinforce these relations more every day through political work and concrete acts on the part of our armed forces, then our struggle will be condemned to failure. No, I'm going to the end of the chapter. Rather in recruiting new people for the armed forces and obtaining the support of the population, or even to justify our sacrifices, it's fundamental to consistently develop good relations between the armed forces and our lands, population, comrades. That means that we're not going to do harm. Where do we have to do harm in order to advance? We have to do it with patience, but not in the interest of one with the delusion of one who wants to fight, to deal blows or something. Everything in the interest of our own people. As I said, it's good to really and clearly spread the idea of where we're going in every moment of our armed struggle, in every moment of our struggles progressions. Our objective is to remove the Portuguese colonialists from our lands in Guinea and Cape Verde. Our idea or our goals is not to stick it to the taxes, to throw them to the ground like when we struggle with someone in a brawl in our land. Okay. Our objective is to remove the colonialists from our land. You saw the case of the war in Vietnam, which led to the independence of the Republic of North Vietnam, when they ended the war with the victory of the Vietnamese in Dien Bien Phu, where they surrounded and defeated almost 30,000 Frenchmen. The French had 500,000 well-placed soldiers in Vietnam in every position, but due to the defeat in Dien Bien Phu, which was an enemy camp, and due to the political pressures in the international sphere, France was obligated to concede. A few war officials became furious at the time, like General Salan and others. And why? Because the French still had a lot of strength, more strength than ever. Taking the concrete case of Algeria, and Algeria reached independence through the negotiations of Evian. The French had never been so strong in Algeria. Everything was partition. French troops were everywhere. Hundreds and thousands of French troops, over and above 1 million civilians, many with weapons in hand. But they gained independence because the political work, the political pressures within the land, the great courage of the Algerian people, and the great sacrifice of people in the cities, comrades. For example, when the French prohibited all demonstrations in Algeria, whoever went out to the street would be killed. The Algerian men, women, and children, young and old, rose up and went out into the streets one Sunday with their flags held high. In one day, the French killed more than 600 Algerians in the streets of Algiers. On the following Sunday, they went out again. Comrades, it's necessary to have courage. We have to feel good about our war compared to the Vietnam and Algerian war. We almost never die. While we are waging war, our people in Bissau enjoy our victories. Madam so-and-so receives invitations from all over where we weren't accustomed to going. License to go to Portugal. Mr. Mandula Daziza, can't say his name, already appeared in the newspapers. Honorable Mrs. de Marinama Carmera in Bissau enjoyed our struggle's success. In Algeria, while the combatants were among the rocks, in the forests, and in the mountains, the population rose up with force in the city, demonstrating without weapons, showing the French that they had to get out. And as that provoked assassinations and massacres, world opinions even in France rose up against the French government. We can say that once the largest forces that won the Algerian war was also French opinion itself, and the Algerian children in France, who numbered more than 500,000 and who conducted sabotages even in France. But as you know, many of them were also favorable to the French, to such an extent that the French killed Algerians as much as the Algerians as in France. But they were forced by world opinion, by the courage of the Algerian people, by the sacrifice to which they had to consent. Because in Algeria the war more than 1.5 million people died for their independence, comrades. 2 times the population of all Guinea died in the Algerian war. 7.5 years of struggle. But the objective of the war of liberation isn't only for the enemy to ask forgiveness from us, to recognize that he lost. It's not that. It's for him to sit down and say that we're right. We can take our land. That we can take our land. That's why we have to know where we're going with our war. And however much more we beat the enemy in every little battle in which we confront him, all the better, because the day will come more quickly when he decides to get out, because everything is already really bad in our land. Unfortunately, the Tagu know that he lost, but he still doesn't leave. Don't forget, we still have to fight him. He knows that he has to hold on in order to also hold on to Angola and Mozambique. And he has to muster strength to hold on a bit, or at least while we don't advance more with the struggle in Cape Verde. The day that our struggle begins in Cape Verde seriously is stretched wider with weapons in hand. And that day, the war in our land will certainly end. But that doesn't mean that it might not end without a struggle beginning in Cape Verde. It might be finished. The truth is that when we start a war in Cape Verde, the Portuguese will become even more confronted from every side. Comrades, we can't repeat enough that the fundamental objective of our armed resistance is to realize that which we can't adopt only with politics. Thus, it's to open new perspectives for our people in independence and in peace, in work, in justice, and for progress. We're convinced that it's our party that can do this. In the context of our people's destiny, which we ourselves are creating, in the context of the demand for our times, history is our party that has the mission through political, economic, and cultural resistance, and the acting forcibly and necessarily in the armed resistance to open this new path for our people, to guarantee for our people the necessary security and the certainty that it will live in progress. That is our mission, comrades, particularly of those comrades who obtain more responsibilities in our party every day. And that's the end. And now we're going to part 3, culture and political struggle. Hold on. Chapter 7, the role of culture in the struggle for independence. Oh my gosh, the preface. Hold on a second. Oh my gosh, okay. Yeah. Right, let me put a bookmark, 168. Stopping at 168. Only went 13 minutes over, not bad. Glad they mentioned Algeria and other struggles during their time. That was pretty cool. That was interesting. That's good. So, that's good. All right. Look at this. Looking for stopping point. Okay. So, since this is 13 minutes over time, I'm gonna go ahead and close it out. I hope everybody appreciate the reading. Thank you for being here.